Welcome back to Utter Punts off season. I'm your host Olly. Today I'm joined by my two fellow Brummies, the Brummie Viking, Dave Keane, and Draft Connoisseur, Jim Sumner. How are you guys doing?
Nah. I mean, Cousins is still gone. Really good, mate. Just
How long you
back's a bit sore. Apart from
gonna
that,
keep riding that
all
Cousins
good.
train then?
Walking in the
Yeah. I'll keep riding it until he retires from the NFL without ever having won a
Well,
Super Bowl.
he's got a
Because he
$2
can't.
million bonus, and
Anyway.
as is tradition on this episode, we're going to talk about Kirk for 45 minutes and then 5 minutes of NFL.
No, we can't. We can't talk about him all the time again. I keep
That's
getting
not
in
on
trouble
me.
for that. So we do need to stop. Whatever. You keep encouraging it, I think.
Anyway, gents, so last week we did free agency, but there's been more moves since then, particularly in the quarterback market. What have you noticed in particular?
Do you want to go first? Because I know we've got a lot of love for the same guy who's been on the move this year.
What, Justin Fields?
Not him. I was thinking about Ronald McDonald at New England. But both me and you had a little bit of fondness in Mac Jones coming out in the draft. Thought he was an excellent leader of men, and he's found his way to the Jags now, hasn't he? For what can only be described as mediocre compensation.
I think mediocre is generous, to be honest. I think a sixth-round pick for Matt Jones is an absolute bargain. He obviously fell off the face of the earth over the last couple of years, but I think when you look at his rookie season and what he achieved with throwing to nothing, definitely worth a punt at a second, no pun intended, with a sixth-round pick. So, yeah, I love that move for the Jags. I mean, he's not going to play. Which is a shame, obviously, with Trevor Lawrence, but he's a little bit injury prone. So you can, and I think if anyone can get him back on the straight and narrow, it's probably Doug Peterson at the Jags. So I think that will be a really solid move for a backup quarterback. And really, I thought the Vikings might have had a shot. To be fair.
Well, when you think about what he moved for, that's a good shout. What do you think?
I think it's an interesting move because some people in Jacksonville, some of the fans, they actually think he could compete for the number one spot. I don't know what you boys think of that, but with the ending to the season that the Jags had, missing out on the playoffs, maybe there's a chance, that they can compete, especially if Trevor Lawrence gets to a bad start.
No. In a word, no. That's not going to happen. He's not been acquired for that reason. If he is competing to start for the Jaguars, something's gone very, very wrong. Is my take on it. It's an interesting one. I think he's gone there and knowing he's not really got much of a chance to play. But having said that, like we said a minute ago, Lawrence has had to play through injuries last year, and the Jags had nothing behind him. I think it was CJ Beathard or whatever it was, who's not the best, and obviously Peterson didn't want to go in that direction. And with the number of quarterback injuries going up exponentially over the last 2 to 3 years, especially having a seasoned backup quarterback who I think he's started something like 45 games in the last 3 years or something like that, and to moderate success, in my opinion. Even when he was bad, I don't think he was that bad. He wasn't Zach Wilson bad at the Jets by any stretch of the imagination. So I think for me, getting out from the Belichick shadow, that should see a nice turnaround for Matt Jones, to be honest, if he gets to play.
So yeah, I've got a slightly different view on Mac Jones' chances of success in Jaguar, just based on a couple of recent examples. One of which is involving the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Doug Peterson, who was the head coach for the Eagles when they won the Super Bowl in 2017. Nick Foles was the quarterback that won that Super Bowl for them. He was the backup for Carson Wentz, who got injured in the run up to the playoffs. He'd been having a fantastic season. Prior to that, he was on course for the Hall of Fame. MVP. Slip of the tongue. Basically, we've got a situation where you've got a head coach who didn't pick Trevor Lawrence, who might not have the same warm fuzzies about him as the people who did pick Trevor Lawrence. And he's bringing in a guy from the Patriots to come and compete. And Trevor might be a victim of trying to play through injuries a little bit like Baker Mayfield was in Cleveland, where he tried to warrior through, put the team on his shoulders, and basically his stock fell as a quarterback. Jim referenced earlier the fact that Trevor has been playing through injuries. The NFL is a very unforgiving league, and if he continues to get injured, there will be an opportunity for Mac Jones, and I'd like for him to be able to seize it, because I don't think Mac Jones as a human being gets enough respect. He was a fantastic leader. It was the Alabama team he was on, Jim.
It was, yeah, and I think the telling piece on the Alabama one was, I think they interviewed Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, who's now at the Eagles, prior to them coming out in the draft, and they said, "Oh, who did you prefer, Tua or Matt Jones?" And that they both instantly said Matt Jones was their boy. So I think it does speak volumes about his character. In that sense, I think he's been hard done by. Let's be fair. In New England last year, he had a defensive coordinator as his offensive coordinator in Matt Patricia. That did him no favor. That did him no favors whatsoever. And in general, I don't have much of an issue with Matt Jones at all. What I would say is, obviously, 3 years in the league, the Patriots declined his 5th-year option, I believe, before they traded him. Or they may have traded him and it's up to Jacksonville to exercise that, which they're not going to do for a 20-odd million 5th-year option for a backup quarterback if everything goes to plan with Trevor Lawrence. So it's a 6th-round pick for a 1-year rental. If he does play half a season, maybe more, maybe slightly less. Let's be honest, with the quarterback contracts we've seen with Kirk Cousins this year, he could Baker Mayfield getting $35 million a year. Yeah, it only takes one team to need a quarterback, and I mean Geno Smith last year, shook the Seahawks down for $30 million. So it only takes a sample size of 10 games to get him back on track, and you could be looking at another $30 million quarterback a year who goes to a quarterback needy team and steps in right away. I think if he does end up staying with the Jaguars, something's gone horribly wrong with Trevor Lawrence. I agree with your point around he's not the head coach's pick. What I would say is he's pretty much the highest graded quarterback that's come out in the draft since Andrew Luck, apart from Caleb Williams, which we'll probably get into later, which is interesting, and we don't need Dave's opinion on that just yet because we all know where that sits. But ultimately, I think, Matt Jones, absolute steal for a 6th-round pick. Really solid pickup by the Jaguars. Hopefully see minimal drop-off if something bad does go wrong with Trevor Lawrence. I can't fault them.
You mentioned Matt Patricia.
Sorry, I've been a complete arse there. I was about to reiterate the point that Pedersen doesn't mind getting off of quarterbacks, just simply because he did that with Carson Wentz. He did that with Nick Foles. It caused him issues at the Eagles, and he was soon not long out the door. But he doesn't appear to be afraid of swapping out a quarterback if they're not giving his offense what he thinks it needs at the time. And he's handpicked Mac, maybe. I'm assuming he's handpicked Mac.
If you can get an MVP season out of Carson Wentz, I think many have tried since and come nowhere close. So I think that speaks to Peterson as a quarterback developer and as a head coach in that sense. So I think I don't think he could have found a better landing spot, especially with the Lawrence injury concerns. He's up for an extension at the end of the season as well. I think he's playing on his 4th year because I think it was the same draft as Matt Jones. So it'll be an interesting year, and we'll see where Matt Jones is this time next year when we're doing this pod.
You mentioned Matt Patricia as his OC in New England. Was it just that, or what else do you think contributed to it not working out there? Because it was a failure in the end, despite how high his potential was viewed when they picked him. It
worried me watching him last year. Because I do love him, so I'm biased in his favour. Even when he was getting accused of dirty play by other players, which he has been accused of, I thought he was just being overly competitive, trying too hard, trying to do everything in his power to try and help his team. But he was missing wide open wide receivers last year. And I think it was the change in coaching staff that kind of brought about the changes in his play, because it was only after he had coaches put upon him who he was trying to go outside the organisation to get around, which is what upset Bill Belichick, and that downward spiral of trust. We've got Tokyo Drift going on outside again. It was very much a spiral that led to him getting to where he got to. His rookie season was solid. If you take the traditional second year leap from your rookie season to your second year, he should have been a decent quarterback in the league. And I can only put that down to the coaching he received. It was Joe Judge and Matt Patricia, wasn't it? Both jointly in charge of the offense.
That's right. A special teams coordinator and a defensive coordinator in charge of the offense. I mean, for me, the Patriots have got a horrible history of drafting or not drafting wide receivers. I don't think they've picked a decent one in the last 10 years in the first couple of rounds. They've got lucky and got some production out of the 5th, 6th and 7th round picks with Tom Brady. A lot of it you could probably argue was down to Josh McDaniels when he was the Patriots offensive coordinator, who he's had 2 spells there. I'm not entirely convinced he won't end up back there at some point. Is he head coach material? No. Is he, you know, he got the best out of Tom Brady in his career. And Matt Jones played under him in the first year of his tenure as the Patriots. And I think that was telling. Obviously McDaniels moved on for a head coaching job, which went horribly. Again, which surprise, twice burnt in that sense. But ultimately, when you've got nothing to throw to, I think that's a big problem. You haven't got a running game, which they haven't had a great running game for years. Their offensive line problems were also there, so time to throw and pick apart defenses. Matt Jones is a rhythm passer. He needs to be able to get into a rhythm and not have 6'5", 280 pound guys running in his face consistently on every snap. And I think if you watch, especially last year, he was under constant pressure with no wide receivers open, a defensive coordinator trying to implement a long passing attack, and ultimately didn't play to Matt Jones' strength. He hasn't got the strongest arm in the world. It's not a noodle by any stretch, but at the same time, it was almost an offense in spite of Matt Jones instead of one built around Matt Jones.
Right, well, we'll have to see how well he does if he does get a chance at Jacksonville. So the other big quarterback news this week obviously has a big effect on the draft and the number 1 overall pick. Justin Fields traded to the Steelers from Chicago, and Mike Tomlin announced that he'll be the backup to Russell Wilson, who we talked about on last week's episode. What's your thoughts on that trade?
Bit of a surprising one for me, with them acquiring Russell Wilson to start. I didn't really think they'd be in the market for another quarterback. I was surprised they gave up on Kenny Pickett, and a little disappointed as a Cleveland Browns fan, having to play Pickett twice a year. It was some of my favourite moments watching Myles Garrett absolutely obliterate him on every other play. So that'll be a little bit of my joy over the NFL lost for next year, I think, because Russell Wilson's a lot better than Kenny Pickett. But as that relates to Justin Fields, just a strange one, to be honest with you. With all the quarterback-needy teams in the league, I think Justin Fields is probably good enough to start in a number of situations. I didn't hate him as a choice for the Vikings. I didn't hate him as a choice for the Broncos. I didn't hate him for a choice for the Raiders. So for him to accept a backup quarterback job with the Steelers, maybe it's good for him to learn from Russell Wilson. I mean, Russell Wilson's character's come under some questions over the last couple of years. Is he too big for the team? Is he a bit of a prima donna? It's just an interesting one. And again, they don't want him to start. If he's starting, something's gone wrong again. But ultimately, it makes me feel that Russell Wilson's on the hot seat. He could well be a 1-year rental for the Steelers and then be looking to cash in again next year if Fields shows enough on the field. So, but ultimately, yeah, just an interesting one. But again, for the price of a 6th round pick, where was everybody else?
Well, I think the Vikings were very much in the camp of, we're not going to trade him to you, because that would have been keeping him in the division. And on the off chance that he does actually turn out to be anything halfway decent, they really wouldn't want to be playing against him twice a year for the foreseeable future. I think upside-wise, he has it. I understand that he took a job as a backup, but if you think about it, he's actually counting more against the cap than Russell Wilson. So, but I don't think those economics will come into it, but Russell Wilson's on a $1.2 million veteran minimum. It's a no-risk deal. He's still getting paid by the Broncos. They've bought in Fields. He was the number 11 overall pick. This was his coming into his fourth year, because they'd have had to take him a fifth-year option at the end of this year, right? Correct?
Yeah.
So he's going to be counting, 12 million, something in that ballpark against the cap.
I think it's actually his third year, and I think he's only going to count about 4 million against the cap, because I read an article the other day that between Wilson and Justin Fields, they will cost 55 million a year less than Deshaun Watson as a combination. So when you put it in that level of context, I know which quarterbacks I'd rather have.
Oh, that hurts. That hurts, doesn't it?
Sorry, Jim.
I mean,
it's quite all right. You won't find any Deshaun Watson love here. So I'm not on that train.
It's a bit weird how like the Seattle Seahawks, formerly I believe the Cleveland Browns, have somehow found a way of rubbing salt into the wounds on the Deshaun Watson trade as well by fleecing the life out of the Broncos for Russell Wilson. So yeah. There doesn't appear to be that many trades where it's win-win, does it? So, I mean, in the long run.
No, I think when we look at this as well, the Broncos and Sean Payton obviously made a decision with 3 or 4 games to go last season that Wilson wasn't his guy. I think that was more of a personality clash than a skills issue, to be honest. I think when you look at his touchdown to interception numbers, I think it was something like 25 touchdowns against 6 interceptions in last season. Obviously not as mobile as he was 5 years ago with the Seahawks. But that's pretty good numbers for a starting quarterback. And even if you're planning to twist in the draft in that sense, it's going to be a really difficult one to replace him. And with them sitting where they are as probably the 6th or 7th team in the draft order for who they're going to get, was it worth backing Sean Payton's ego to get rid of Russell Wilson and effectively have to tear it down and start again? Does George Patton, the Denver Broncos general manager, have that much time for a new quarterback to come in and really elevate the team? Does Sean Payton have that much time? I know they paid 2 second-round picks for him, but Wilson's been there for 2 years, and they've jettisoned him, and he cost them 3 first-round picks. So Sean Payton at 2 second-round picks, he could well find himself out at the end of the year if things go how I think they could well go for the Broncos, because they don't have much there.
It's awful management by the Broncos, isn't it? Giving up that much for Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, and then what's happened where the Steelers are effectively only paying $1 million and you're paying $40 million towards their quarterback.
I think it's 40 million this year, and I think he's on the book for 39 million, 45 million next year as a dead cap hit.
85 to 86 million we're going to have to pay him across these 2 years.
That's fireable. That's a fireable offence from a general manager perspective, to be honest, and it's a fireable offence for the head coach.
Conspiracy theory time on the Broncos. So the previous GM of the Broncos was John Elway, right? And he'd done it for years without a lot of success, without really finding a quarterback. And then they brought in the right-hand man of Rick Spielman, George Patton, to come in and be the GM, whilst Elway went upstairs. Has George Patton still got a job there? Well, maybe he's just been the middleman for Elway, and that situation has never really changed, because there's got to be something keeping him in place. Unless he's got a ridiculously good contract, they can't afford to let him go off. There is no way he should still be there, having wasted that much draft capital on a quarterback who's no longer at the team, and they've wasted the careers of some pretty decent draft picks in terms of where they were taken. Jerry Jeudy now gone to the Browns on a $51 million deal in that ballpark, I think, about $17 million a year. So he's gone. He was considered to be a consensus top 3 wide receiver in the draft. But Ruggs went first. Then I think it was CeeDee Lamb to the Cowboys, then Judy, then Jalen Reagor to the Eagles, and then Justin Jefferson to the Vikings. I know that draft run quite well, I think. And I've probably got it wrong now, somewhere in there. But it just goes to show you don't really know what you're getting. But he had an opportunity to take Justin Jefferson and didn't at that point, and which is pretty much a fireable offence because Jefferson was really good in college. I know that a lot of people claim that he worked out the slot a lot, but that's because of had Jamar Chase on the outside. When he did play on the outside, he was still good there. So Patton seems to have a problem picking good offensive players. Just has done throughout his history. He's all right on defense, but that whole tree, that whole general manager tree seems to struggle when it comes to the offensive players. And then have a little bit of bad luck when they do hit on them. Although Spillman will argue that he did take Jefferson, but I think anybody would at that point after the Eagles did what they did. So it's just one of those situations where I can only assume there's financial or internal political reasons for the Broncos not having got rid of Patton because he hasn't done anything to stay in that job that's praiseworthy.
My take on this is Russell Wilson was an ownership acquisition. Patton was probably told that he had to go and get a quarterback. And I think when you looked at it on the face of things, you're talking, Russell Wilson. He's won a Super Bowl. He's guided an average Seahawks offense, I think, into the playoffs for most years under Pete Carroll. So, in theory, what you were getting was a high-level quarterback. And at the time, with, like you say, with the draft picks in Jerry Jeudy, and then they've got like Cortland Sutton and others in their receiving core, he was seen as the missing piece. They felt they were a quarterback away. They felt like they were a quarterback away since Peyton Manning retired from the NFL. So, I think for me, it's just a case of Patton might be getting a second lease on life, and I do wonder if he sits behind the scenes just going, "I told you so. We should have drafted a quarterback and not sunk a 5-year, $200 million deal into, or it might even be more than that for us. So I think it's 5 years, $220 million or something with 160 guaranteed, and now they're on the hook for that second half of that 80 million. So I think ultimately it feels like if it was a Patton pick, it's a miracle he's still got a job. I personally think it was an ownership push on that one to go and get a quarterback. And to be fair, at the time, he was the best one available. I don't think many people really questioned it at the time and said, Russell Wilson, 3 first-round picks. Very
much so. At the time, everyone thought it was a missing piece for the Broncos. I can't dispute that. They had, was it Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, there were other people there as well who were decent personnel. I genuinely thought the Broncos were going to be strong.
One of the best defenses in the league as well under Vic Fangio when he was the defensive coordinator there. So I think from a team perspective, they were on the cusp. Obviously, they had Nathaniel Hackett as the head coach, and that went horribly. And again, he's the Jets' offensive coordinator last year. That went horribly. So I'm not sure what people quite. I mean, I know he's Aaron Rodgers'
injuries,
but he is Aaron Rodgers' buddy. But ultimately, he couldn't run a team. The Broncos suffered with that. They still had a stout defense. It tailed off a little bit last year, admittedly, just as Russell Wilson picked up, in my opinion. He took a year to get his feet under the table. Could have gone a lot better. Could have gone better. I agree. But like we said, 26 touchdowns, 6 interceptions in a season. I'd give my left leg for that as a Browns fan, having watched a combination of 5 quarterbacks last year. He's not injured very often. So I think there's so obviously the getting rid of him is a Peyton move, but they're now in the situation where the head coach and the general manager now really have to pick their franchise quarterback, and they could be without mortgaging the farm again. They're looking at the number 5 or number 6 quarterback in this draft class that's going to be available to them, unless they make a significant move up the board, which is going to cost a lot of future capital, or 1 or 2 of their best players that they've still got on the team. And I don't think they can afford to do that in the current situation.
It makes it all the more remarkable to me when you break down the Broncos like that they didn't have a flyer at Justin Fields. But you can probably get it from a perspective of, Sean Payton likes his offenses to be on time, very much a timing thing. So maybe he felt Fields a bit too much of a freewheeler. Mac Jones was there, available for hardly anything as well. So when you're looking at what he's doing at the moment, I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what their plans are at QB. It's going to cost them a lot to move up for anyone not named Michael Penix Jr. They might get him sitting where they are. There's maybe Bo Nix. Maybe he sees something that he thinks other people aren't. I don't know. But I'd be a little bit worried if I was a Broncos fan. But I didn't at least take what I think will be a decent starter in Mac Jones in offense, which kind of plays to his strengths: on-time rhythm throws, getting the ball out quickly. That was very much what he was doing as a rookie. So, yeah, both Mac Jones and Justin Fields going for such a little amount of compensation. It's slightly confusing to me that there weren't more teams interested in picking up what I think are two potentially high ceiling players even there.
Yeah, I mean, to round out on Justin Fields, really, we'll see how that goes in Pittsburgh. Like I said, I think the Wilson piece may end up being a 1-year rental, and Fields may end up being the quarterback of the future. If he's as bad as the 6th round draft pick compensation suggests, then I'll be over the moon as a Browns fan, to be honest. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But absolutely, I mean, apparently the Bears did right by Justin Fields in terms of they turned down higher offers for him and took the 6th round pick from the Steelers because that's where he asked to go. Which, if true, is fair play to the Bears in that respect. That's an acknowledgement of how poorly they've supported his development over the first few years of his career. So that's significant. But at the same time, when you're going in behind Russell Wilson. If he learns how Russell played for the first sort of 7 or 8 years of his career, the Steelers will have done well. If he doesn't, then the Steelers will either be rolling with Wilson for a while or will be back in for looking for a starter in the next draft or the draft after that. So we'll just have to see how it goes.
Because we're talking about quarterbacks today, particularly, one thing you mentioned with the Russell Wilson acquisition from the Broncos is you think it was an ownership motivated move, not the general manager. Do you think in the NFL, particularly around quarterbacks, is it always a mistake when ownership interferes with the general manager and the head coach when picking a player like that?
I'm not a fan of ownership getting involved. I mean, you pay your football people a lot of money to be able to evaluate these sort of players, especially some of these coaches that have been in the game for 20 years. Ultimately, the owners own the team, hence the name. They're billionaires in most cases, and they've not been told no in a very long time. I think if an owner's getting involved with draft picks, I mean, the Browns saw it with Johnny Manziel, where that was a Jimmy Haslam pick, and effectively cost our general manager his job the year after that. It rarely works out well when an owner's pushing the team into either a specific draft pick or a huge signing. I know Dave's probably going to cover off the Kirk piece with the Vikings in a minute, and how I think Kwesi at the Vikings has probably upset the owners by not re-upping him. But at the same time, they don't get told no. It's a difficult one. But for me, you should let your football people manage the football side of things. And that's the same in any sport. Owners are that. They're there for a reason. Yes, they pay the bills. Yes, but they also make a lot of money out of it. And they're far bigger experts in the business side of football than they are in the nuts and bolts and picking players. And you know what? If an owner wants to pick a player in the draft, or trade back one spot, pick up a 7th round pick, give him a 7th rounder, and let him prove himself. Let's see what happens. You shouldn't be blowing a 1st round pick on that, or you shouldn't be blowing 3 1st round picks on Russell Wilson. You shouldn't be, mortgaging the farm and your job because your owner told you to do it. And I think when an owner gets involved, it typically goes one way, and that's badly.
Philosophically, it's a silly thing to do. This is why. If you're the owner and you are employing a general manager and a head coach, they're your football experts. If you have the arrogance to think that you know better than your football experts, then you've already made one incorrect football decision, which was to give those two guys a job. So why are you compounding that mistake, right? Or you made the right decision first and your football experts are doing their job in terms of explaining to you what the best options are in this situation. And then out of ego or overconfidence or just a desire to show everybody that daddy's in charge or whoever it may be is in charge, they say, this is my guy. Now, let's look at what's happened to the Panthers with Bryce Young, who many people still believe has every opportunity to go on and still be a good quarterback in the league. I concur. He does have that opportunity. I just think that he's going to have to show that he's made of superhuman steel at his physical build. I worry about him physically in the league because he's small in a league filled with giants. It's that simple, really. I personally love watching him play in college. Thought he showed great anticipation. He's not getting the same kind of payoffs where he's anticipating where people are going to be because defenses are better at reading the same kind of schemes that you are, so you've got to disguise it more. But he wasn't the choice of a coach who's now lost his job, Frank Reich, wasn't it? He was the choice of the owner. And the choice of the head coach who was there is now widely acclaimed to be the best rookie quarterback from that class, right? CJ Stroud, head and shoulders above anybody else there right now. So what you've done is you've undermined your coach. You've forced your opinion upon a team. It's not a quick thing to go away. So now you're still going to be in a position where you want to show everybody that you're right. Therefore, you're going to double down on it. You're going to try and build a team around a guy who your football experts at the time said they didn't want, or at least they had a preference higher elsewhere. And you're in a situation where you now have to either build around that player and then you're bringing in new coaches who, again, didn't pick that guy, right? So now you've undermined your quarterback with your next coach because they didn't pick that guy. The next GM comes in and he's like, why did we sell the farm? The people who did this must have been crazy. Oh, it's my boss, right? So you're basically in a situation where you are demanding something like that from your football experts. You better be 100% damn sure that you're right. And if they do go against your, if you insist that you have the final say and you force them to go along with your way of thinking, then Jim might have hit the nail on the head as to why George Patton still got a job in Denver, because it's a silly thing to do. And if you fire them afterwards, you've kind of cost yourself there. So you've stopped them from proving to you that they can do their job. And then you can't really fire them because they were correct and you were wrong. So interesting in that situation.
Yeah, interesting tidbit on this piece. When the Chiefs moved up in the draft to select Patrick Mahomes, John Dorsey was the general manager of the Kansas City Chiefs at that time. I think he sent a first and maybe even a second round pick to, I think it was Buffalo, who were sitting there one pick ahead of the Browns because the Browns were due to take him at 12. And he traded up for Mahomes. So they already had Alex Smith as a starter. The ownership in Kansas City believed in Alex Smith. They'd pushed for the trade for Alex Smith the season before. And John Dorsey actually got fired as the general manager about 2 weeks after the draft. After he selected Patrick Mahomes, who's widely regarded as the best quarterback in the league. So it does cost people their jobs, whether they're right or they're wrong. Some people won't even wait to see that out. Bryce Young, classic example of David Tepper tirade, I think, is probably the best way to put that. Let's be honest with you as well. You're giving up the number one receiver to Chicago as part of that deal. So he's had Adam Thielen, the ex-Vikings receiver, was their number one last year, a 33-year-old who's not the player he was 5-6 years ago at the Vikings. So let's be honest, Bryce Young was put into a situation where he couldn't succeed. Their offensive line's effectively a sieve. And yes, they've spent some money this off season. They still haven't surrounded him with any sort of receiver talent. They don't have a first round pick. So they're not going to be, getting one of the top ones from that side of things. So Bryce Young is going to be 2 years into his NFL career on a losing Carolina team. The Panthers aren't going to be markedly better next year, unfortunately, for Panthers fans. And they're just not set up for success. I think the biggest thing for drafting a rookie quarterback is, or even bringing a quarterback in, you need to have the players around him to support him. The Patriots found that out with Matt Jones when they didn't have any wide receivers, which we've already covered. Bryce Young hasn't got anyone to throw to or anyone to block for him. He's got mediocre running backs. It's not all on the quarterback. A lot of it is. But Justin Fields failed in Chicago for the same reasons. They didn't get him a wide receiver until last year. Then obviously there were injuries and whatnot, and never really gave him a fair shot because he was under siege in the pocket on every play. Now all of a sudden they've spent $150 million on their offensive line, in terms of a couple of 3 or 4 year contracts at 60-70 million a piece to guards or whatever. And they're going to bring a rookie quarterback into that and probably draft a wide receiver with the number 9 pick. So they're immediately setting up their number 1 overall pick in a far better situation than Justin Fields has ever had in Chicago. So it's all about what you're surrounding them with, unless you're Deshaun Watson, where you're obviously paying someone $60 million a year for 6 games and below average play, when he's actually got all the weapons, the best running back in the league, and a top 5 offensive line. But we can get into that another time.
No, he needs to look into what he's doing for physical therapy, find something that suits him better, so he can get himself back.
Needs to get back on Instagram, mate, by the sounds of things, to be honest. Yeah, but we'll leave that where it is before we get sued.
I'm just out talking about physical training. Right, so...
Dave with Kirk. Dave with Kirk, you with Deshaun Watson.
It's amazing what happens when teams overpay quarterbacks. It's like the fans who pay attention to value for money aspects of the game start to get a little bit frustrated. Yeah.
Well, keeping on quarterbacks, kind of, I got to give a shout out to a guy who's just retired, who was a menace for quarterbacks for multiple years, Aaron Donald, who's at the Los Angeles Rams. What's your thoughts on him retiring and how it affects the Rams going forward?
Well, it helps for Rams in terms of the fact that it takes pressure off their cap. It absolutely ruins the Rams in terms of the fact they're losing a generational player who at 32 years of age has earned enough money now to go and enjoy the rest of his life doing whatever it is he chooses to do. And congratulations to him, because he's an absolute menace. He's a man who it appeared to be... Somehow he had the agility of a running back, playing as a defensive tackle, but have the strength to hold up against the run and to move double teams out of the way with one arm. Some of the plays I've seen him make over the years were genuinely mind-blowing. He was literally levering guys who must have had a 70-pound advantage on him out of the way. That's 5 stone. Yeah, just a very, very impressive human being who kind of came along after JJ Watt was the supreme pass rusher. Then Aaron Donald came along as JJ Watt got a little bit eroded by injuries, didn't have as much playing time, and was doing it from a slightly different position. And I'm interested to see who takes up the mantle of the interior disruptor moving forward in the league, because I don't think there is anyone else as dominant as those two at the moment. There's Myles Garrett out on the edge, there's Nick Bosa out on the edge, very impressive players. Crosby, another great player. But in terms of interior menace, apart from maybe Chandler Jones of the Chiefs, I'm struggling to think of many off the top of my head who have been quite as disruptive as Aaron Donald or JJ Watt in recent years. So, yeah, I'm going to miss him, but I'm also glad he's gone for when we play the Rams.
Yeah, he's a second. People have been talking about him as possibly the best defensive tackle ever. I'm not as much of a historian as I'd like to be, so I can't comment on that. But I think he's definitely the best defensive tackle that the league's seen in the last 10 years. Like you said, generational talent in that respect. I mean, let's be honest, the big winners of this, Brock Purdy at the 49ers, Geno Smith at the Seahawks, and Kyler Murray the Cardinals, who are all in the same division, and all of a sudden will probably have significantly more time to throw than they did have. So I think a great player, drafted number 10, number 11, or number 12, something like that. I think it was in the end for the Rams. Always considered a bit short.
Anthony Barr.
Yeah, he was after Anthony Barr, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, when you look at it, the contribution that he brought to that defense, the Rams have had, a top defense for the last 5-6 years, probably longer than that once they got it sorted out there. It's going to be a huge miss. The Rams must have known it's coming. It's not like a player to do that after a week of free agency and all the best replacements have gone. So unless there's some hard feelings there, I don't know how that's worked out. But yeah, Aaron Donald, definitely the best defensive tackle that we've seen play the game for, the last 10, 15 years for sure. The guy was the highest paid defensive player for a while as well in terms of his $30 million a year contract as a defensive tackle. Huge miss for the Rams. Now they have tried to beef up their edge and their pass rush, which is fine. But ultimately, if you're going to be soft up the middle, then they could be in trouble. And like I say, it's just going to be a relief for those quarterbacks that would have been playing him twice a year, especially the running ones like Kyler Murray. So I think they'll be very thankful that he's no longer there.
Do you want to hear the list of players who were taken before Aaron Donald?
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got Jadeveon Clowney of the Houston Texans at number 1 overall. Became serviceable player, but not really a pass rush talent, which is what you want if you're taking someone number 1 overall.
Somewhat of a journeyman, played for 3 or 4 different teams in his career. Still a free agent today, taking visits.
Yep. Number 2 was Greg Robinson, taken by the Rams. Who's an offensive tackle, and I think he didn't even last his first contract there. I think he got traded away.
Got traded to the Browns for a 6th round pick in year 4, I think.
The number 3 overall pick that year. This is a thing of beauty. This is a man who I have nothing but respect for. He made an absolute fortune from the NFL without ever really being particularly great at it. Blake Bortles, Jacksonville Jaguars.
Outstanding.
Second
only to Kirk Cousins in pulling the wool over people's eyes, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. Then we've got, I remember this was a big trade up at the time. The Buffalo Bills moved up to take wide receiver Sammy Watkins from Clemson, who is a really, really good wide receiver, but hasn't ever really stuck anywhere in his career at a team for anything. Like, he kept getting traded for really good picks, didn't he? Must have made a decent amount of money out of the NFL, but not really the transcendent star that a couple of the other wide receivers taken after him became. Number 5, this is a hell of a player, and you could argue that it's fair that he went ahead of Aaron Donald, at least for the first 3 or 4 years of their careers. That was Khalil Mack, taken by the Raiders. Then we've got an offensive tackle taken by the Falcons, Jake Matthews. I think he made a Pro Bowl and was all right, nothing special. This is a hell of a draft when I'm looking at it. Mike Evans, taken number 7 by Tampa Bay. Okay. But then we've got the Browns taking a cornerback who I think bust, Justin Gilbert. He wasn't exactly a transcendent talent, was he? He was decent, though.
Huge bust.
It was a huge bust. Oh, it was a different. Yeah, I'm thinking of a different Gilbert.
Difficult to move then.
Then the Vikings took Anthony Barr, Mike Zimmer's first draft pick, I think, with the Vikings. He was a good player for us. I used to love Anthony Barr, but injuries kind of took their toll on him. Then the Detroit Lions wasted a pick on tight end Eric Ebron. Good player, but kept getting injured and didn't really stick anywhere. The Titans spent number 11. We're still not at him yet. The Titans spent number 11 on Taylor Lewan. Then the New York Giants took a really, really good player who burned very brightly for a while, and he's still in the league today. He was a good player, but I think I actually got challenged on whether or not he was a flash in the pan player. And I think it was a valid challenge. I probably can't call him flash in the pan, but what I meant by that was he really did burn brightly for a couple of years. He was by far the best receiver in the league, and I don't think he's hit that level since his injuries. So, and then Aaron Donald. So there are probably about 5 or 6 good players taken before him, but
So is Odell Beckham Jr. at 12, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the horror show draft for the Browns where we took Gilbert at 8 and Johnny Manziel at 22, 23. So that was what cost Ray Farmer his job.
I think it's fair. You managed to avoid excellent players.
We traded out of the number 3 pick, which we could have picked Khalil Mack, a pick before the Raiders did. So, yeah, that was a dark time to be a Browns fan. One of the many over the last decade or so, but that draft in particular still hurts today. To be fair, when you've just articulated in terms of the players that were selected even before Aaron Donald, and I think if you actually went down the list,
there's more good players
immediately after that. There's some good players there as well. So, yeah, I mean, it speaks. That was a very strong draft class. Aaron Donald, I imagine, will be a first ballot Hall of Famer when he comes up for that piece. Just from a production standpoint, there's been no one that's matched him from a sacks and quarterback pressures in that respect. From a defensive tackle,
tackles for loss as well. I mean,
since he came into the league. Unbelievable. And like you said, the agility of a running back at 290, 300 pounds, played the run well, rushed the passer, the best, like I said, one of the best we've ever seen, and just generally a huge loss for the Rams. I do wonder that, there's been rumours of Sean McVay stepping away from the Rams for probably the last couple of off seasons. Is this going to be the season that the Rams finally bottom out and McVay does step away? And if that's the case, then the Rams will go back into their what seems to be every 5 or 6 years rebuild that they end up doing. They went from Sam Bradford at quarterback to Jared Goff, and now to Matthew Stafford. And if Stafford's getting on a bit, and now Donald's gone, and they're losing a lot of their big pieces, and they haven't had a lot of draft capital over the last few years because there was a joke going around who needs a first round pick, which I think came from their general manager, which is all well and good when you're winning 12 games a season, 13 games a season, when you've got Aaron Donald terrorising quarterbacks. And Matthew Stafford, in that situation, and they won a Super Bowl, but ultimately, we're hitting the backside of those players' careers now, and like we said, Donald's out the door, and that defense is going to take a step back as a result of that.
Well, Aaron Donald, who's almost certainly spending his retirement watching compilations of Utter Punts video, and this one in particular, congratulations on your retirement from all the punts. We wish you the best. Thank you for leaving the NFC. So, lads, before we move on to our review of a mock draft, what's your thoughts on any other news before we move on?
Been a quiet week, to be honest, outside of that first sort of free agent frenzy in that first few days that we covered off last week, and the departure of the great Kirk Cousins from the Vikings that we covered in minute detail last week. Realistically, there's not been a huge amount of movement. I mean, obviously, you've got the Browns that have just signed Jerry Jeudy to a 3-year, $53 million contract, I think it was. Which is an interesting one for a receiver that's never gone over 750 yards in a season. It's not all that it seems. He was already on 12.9 guaranteed this year, which is actually rolled into that 41 million guaranteed that he was getting. So it's not as bad as it looks on the at first glance. But still an interesting move. But from a Cleveland perspective, they've been after him for 2 years. They've already got Amari Cooper in place. They've got Elijah Moore as their slot receiver. Cedric Tillman is up and coming. So I think from a Browns perspective, they've filled out their depth chart from a wide receiver. Very cheap price, 5th and a 6th round pick, 53 million, for an overall contract for 3 years. Not so cheap. But when you put it in context with Calvin Ridley, which Dave can probably come on to in a minute, it's probably not that bad.
There is another quarterback move that did catch my eye because it was particularly pertinent to our podcast. Do you remember who was throwing passes to Dan at Twickenham last year? Backup quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens. Tyler
Huntley.
Tyler Huntley. Is it Tyler? Where's he playing now, Jim?
He's our 4th quarterback. He's our 3rd quarterback that we've signed this offseason. He's a Pro Bowler, so apparently.
He got it from a technicality, yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't James Winston as well?
Isn't who?
Jameis
Oh yeah,
Winston
yeah, you're right.
well.
Yeah. So yeah, Deshaun Watson, Jameis Winston, Tyler Huntley, just Dorian Thompson-Robinson left, and I think he's got a way to go from what we saw last year. To be fair,
so who the Ravens got a quarterback now, apart from Lamar?
I think they've got Trace McSorley as their backup quarterback. I think they took him last year in the 7th or as an undrafted free agent. So again, didn't see the field last year. Lamar didn't get injured. I don't think he was significantly injured anyway.
He wasn't. He got through the whole season fine. They kind of like took the ball out of his hand, stopped him from getting beaten up quite so much, and let him do things with his arm. But I'm a little bit surprised they're not keeping around an experienced backup within their system. Maybe they're thinking that they're varying the system a little bit more so they can bring in a little bit more of a pocket passer to back up Lamar. But I think you definitely need to back Lamar up just because the nature of the guy as a competitor, he's going to put himself on the line at some point. And injuries happen. Like, you can't avoid it when you're someone who can basically decide, right, I'm going to tuck and run and beat 15 guys, go for the line, take a clobber in on the line. It could happen. So, just struck me that Ravens QB room looks a little bit thinner. So I'm intrigued to see what they come up with there, and maybe they will take someone in the draft as well. I mean, why not?
I wouldn't be surprised if they take a late round flyer on a backup quarterback, maybe Milton from Tennessee.
Good arm
with his arm strength that he showed off at the combine, and he's somewhat mobile as well. Bit surprised they let Huntley walk. He's obviously been the first choice backup for Lamar, and from what I understand, we've signed him on a veteran minimums contract, so
we haven't really tried to keep him, right?
No, exactly. They've let him walk, which is absolutely fine. I expect him to be the third quarterback on the Browns for next year. I think we'll be looking at Deshaun, unfortunately, as number one, with James Winston and Tyler Huntley. Winston at 2, Huntley at 3. I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson's actually going to get cut in the off season and probably be tried to sign to the practice squad in that respect. So I think we're going to be going. I think it shows that the Browns are probably going to want experience at that position. We obviously struggled big time with it once Deshaun went down. I think with PJ Walker, Thompson Robinson, and Joe Flacco in the end, all starting games after that. So I think they've looked at this and gone, well, Deshaun might be made out of spit and sawdust, so we might need a few backups in place, and that's the only logic I can think of for signing a third quarterback of the off season. So
I genuinely thought it was just to upset Dan, and I was delighted.
I'm happy with that.
Thank you everyone for watching as we rounded out free agency, talking about the quarterbacks, Justin Fields, Mac Jones and more. We appreciate you watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, drop a comment, let us know your thoughts, and we'll see you next time.